Welcome to Coffee Commerce. My name is Sean Mamet, and I'm the grandson of a coffee farmer from Guyana, South America. On Coffee Commerce, we talk about the stories behind coffee as they relate to society, culture, and business. And we've been talking about French Guyana and the role that Brazil played in bringing coffee from French Guyana into Brazil. So we can thank French Guyana for what happens to coffee growth in Brazil next. In the 1700s, it only took about 10 years for the Caribbean and South America to have made quite the stir related to coffee, mostly from smuggling, stealing, and espionage, though. From Declus arriving in Martinique in 1717 with coffee seedlings taken under the cover of night from the Royal Botanical Gardens of Paris. The Dutch did bring their coffee plants around this same time as well, in order to try to duplicate their fortunes as they did in Java. Then in 1719, coffee plants were stolen from the Dutch colony of Suriname and brought to French Guyana for cultivation. In 1727, the first coffees from French Guyana were smuggled into Brazil. In Brazil, which is where we are now, the first coffee tree was planted in the state of Para in 1727. Para is located in north-central part of Brazil, and for quite some time, it would remain in this region, mostly servicing the domestic coffee market. The Brazilians were consuming their own coffee. And for the next decades, as a matter of fact, coffee was a minor crop in Brazil. Coffee plantations slowly started to spread, eventually making their way south to the Rio de Janeiro in 1770. The 18th century Brazil is not the Brazil that we know today. Over 200 years ago, sugar was the cash crop that Brazil was focused on growing, and they're exporting. So farmland and farmers were focused on making their income from sugar and other crops of that day. Sugar and some other crops were also considered high yield and very valuable commodities to the rest of the world. So the price they would get for sugar, in particular, was very lucrative for these farmers. To introduce a new crop at this time, farmers didn't have the experience, they didn't have the desire, the need to financially, and they really didn't have the time to invest into a new crop for such as coffee. It would not be until sugar demand started to taper a little bit, although sugar demand has still remained high. But when it started to taper, farmers started to look to other crops to grow. At the same time, as demand started to ease for sugar, coffee demand started to grow in the Americas and in Europe. One of the potential drawbacks to Brazil adopting coffee as a crop was the processing of coffee was very manual and tedious. Farmers used to wash the coffee seeds by hand. Other countries had developed machine washing processes. This would not be the case in Brazil, though. Another drawback was the Brazilian farmers were in low altitudes. This was the opposite of where coffee was grown in other parts of the world, especially in well-known regions, where coffee was grown at higher altitudes. The higher altitudes gives the coffee cherries a bit of sweetness when compared to lower altitude countries like Brazil, where the cherries were not as sweet. So based on less sweet cherries and the manual washing process, this would deter Brazilian farmers again from the coffee crop. Interestingly enough, though, both of these challenges combined gave Brazilian coffee beans a unique taste and something that was not predicted. It appears that the manual harvesting and washing process would be a more natural process to harvest the beans. This actually gave the beans more of a fruity character than if they had used machine washed alone. So even though their coffee was grown in lower altitudes, their process to manually wash the beans ended up giving Brazil a unique coffee taste and their coffee a unique flavor. After discovering this unique combination, both became blessings in disguise, really. The coffee coming out of Brazil became renowned for its unique taste and coffee, and it was branded as such. So it was that at this time that then coffee would start to grow in Brazil and be used as an export market. It would still take time before Brazil became the renowned coffee producer in the world, but Brazil now was on their way, thanks to two things that happened that seemed to be things that would draw people away from farming coffee, and these things became blessings in disguises. The manual processing of washing coffee and the low altitude combined together gave Brazil the winning combination that they need that would take them on the world stage for coffee. But that's another story for another cup of coffee. Thank you. Welcome to Coffee Commerce. My name is Sean Ramit, and I'm the grandson of a coffee farmer from Guyana, South America. On Coffee Commerce, we talk about the stories behind coffee as they relate to society, culture, and business. And we've been talking about French Guyana and the role that Brazil played in bringing coffee from French Guyana into Brazil. So we can thank French Guyana for what happens to coffee growth in Brazil next. In the 1700s, it only took about 10 years for the Caribbean and South America to have made quite the stir related